everyone. Thanks for joining us, and I hope your day was productive, and thanks for saving some energy for this session late in the day. My name is Mahmoud Matouk. I am a solutions architect with AWS Identity, and I'm specialized in customer identity and access management. Most of my engagements with customers is on modernizing their identity and building identity for new products and new applications. And usually user migration is a core part of these discussions. So in this session, we'll discuss what are the approaches available to you to migrate users, how to choose between them, and what are the characteristics of each one of these approaches. I'm also joined by Dibak and Oman from Fandango, and they will share their customer perspective about these migration approaches and how they ran some successful large-scale migrations for Fandango brands. So here's what to expect in this session. This is advanced, so we will get into architecture diagrams and discussions of the building blocks of Cognito, and I assume you already have some familiarity with Cognito naming conventions. I will start by some introduction about what we are seeing in the field, why customers migrate users, and what are triggering these discussions, and why they choose Cognito for this modernization journey. And also, we will talk then about the approaches and different patterns available for user migration and how to choose between them. We will then give it to Fandango to give us some of their experience about these migrations, and we will close with few considerations and a few next steps you can take with you as you embark on this journey of yours. So first, why migration is happening, why customers migrate users. Or really, why would you do any changes in your system? And the simple answer to this is to adapt. Adapting to the customer requirements, adapting to the market requirements, adapting to the growth in your environment, the growth in your products and applications, and so on. It's clear that over the past few years, there is a rise in the digital-first mentality. People are preferring to engage more online before going to a physical store or doing transactions some other way. Maybe this peaked at the COVID time, but of course, data indicates that this will continue. Data from the annual trade survey indicated that in 2020, e-commerce sales rose by 43%. This is no surprise because this is the COVID year where every business found themselves in a situation where they have to offer their services online. Every person on the planet found themselves in a situation where you have to engage online if you want to get things done. Other data points from Salesforce surveys indicate that people liked it. Well, more than 50% indicated that they prefer doing online shopping, and more than 60% indicated that they will even increase this in the next few years. So this is definitely rising, and it's not going anywhere. But what's also rising with this, as people engage more online, their requirements and their expectations increase. They start comparing you with other products. They start asking for more customized experience. And all of this might trigger you into modernizing your solution. So why is this relevant to user migration, and how does this impact you? Well, the first thing that users come to your website, and the first thing they do is creating accounts or authenticating, and so before doing any transactions with you. So this is usually the first customer experience they see on your website. These customer experience are key to success. Sometimes they will drive people to do more business or less business with you. This also leads you to continuously modernizing your enterprise applications to meet the demand of these customers. And of course, keep up with the competitions. As users are coming from different channels, from mobile, from web, from phone, from IoT devices in some cases, you need to make sure that all of these channels are open and secure. This also forces you to have unified user experience. So regardless of user coming from mobile, from web, from anywhere else, you need to identify them and recognize them as one user and deal with them as such. They expect this from your product to continue doing business with you. And of course, every business has some peaks and spikes. Whether it's seasonal, it happens in the holidays, or whether it's something that happens every day at 8 a.m. or monthly during the pay period or anything like that. So every business needs to be able to meet the demand of these scalable situations without being over-provisioned. And you need to reduce security risks as you innovate. I talk to many customers, and the first thing they say, I want to get myself out of the business of managing passwords. I want to focus on my business and shift this risk to somebody else. All of this leads to modernization of SIAM solutions. So sometimes you question whether I have the right solution or not, whether I should be having a homegrown solution or I should move this to a managed service. And this leads many customers to choose Amazon Cognito. So why Amazon Cognito is something that can help you with this journey? The first thing we hear from customers is that they like the scale and availability of Amazon Cognito. It's available in 20 regions now, and this is number just going to increase in the future. It's doing over 100 billion authentications per month for our customers globally. Just think about this number for a minute. It is a very, very massive number. And it helps you to understand the scale of this service, and this is a reliable system that you can trust with your customer identities. The other thing is that Amazon Cognito is a core service within the AWS ecosystem. It's deeply integrated with services like API Gateway, Lambda, and other services that allows you to have easier developer experience, faster time to market, and eventually reduces the risk of writing custom logic yourself. This integration will continue, and as you saw today, we launched Amazon Verified Permissions with day one integration with Cognito, because we understand that authentication and authorization are things that customers are looking to do in their applications. We want to make this easy, we want to make this secure as much as possible. Then Amazon Cognito offers a suite of security features that I'd like to call invisible security. It allows your customers to have seamless experience, but at the same time, a lot of security features kick under the hood, and also it challenges the user if and when necessary. Count verification, preventing end users from using compromised or weak credentials, doing adaptive authentication, calculating a risk for every request. These are the things that a platform like Amazon Cognito provides for your business, so you don't have to worry about this yourself. These are some of the reasons that customers choose Cognito for, but the list goes on. Well, now moving into the core topic of this session, if you decided to migrate users to Amazon Cognito, what are the options available to you? You can think about 4 core patterns, and majority of customers use combination of these or variations of these. So think about these as foundational patterns. We'll go into the details of each one, the characteristics and features, and then we will help you at the end to choose between them. First one is user import jobs. Think about this as structuring users in a bulk data dump and importing this into Amazon Cognito. The second pattern is just-in-time migration, which is a seamless migration of users as they interact with your system. They come to sign in or change their password, and you can migrate users at this time. The third pattern is admin-created users or pre-provisioned users from admin or backend scripts. And the last pattern is relevant to users who are federated, so coming from social sign-in or federation with SAML and OpenID Connect, how to migrate these users, or do you need to migrate these users or not? Let's talk about the first one, the user import jobs. In user import jobs, you create your Cognito resources, which what we call the Amazon Cognito user pool. This is the main user directory for you. You structure the user schema, so what are the attributes you expect to see in a user profile. And then you can export from the user pool a CSV header, which tells you here is the schema that you need to structure your users in. Then you build a series of CSV files with the users you want to migrate. Then you upload these CSV files into Cognito as import jobs. You can create many of these jobs. They will run in parallel. You can create many of these files. We usually recommend creating files with smaller batches. So if you are migrating 100,000 users, create 10 files, 10,000 users each, because this will make it easier to troubleshoot if one job fails and so on. Cognito then runs through these jobs and import the users in a reset required state. What this means is that the user is imported and active, but the user is required to reset their password when they sign in. We'll look at the user experience in the next slide. Cognito also, during this process, publishes all of the imported, skipped, or failed transactions to CloudWatch logs. So you can easily troubleshoot why something failed. Most of the failures we see during this phase is because of duplicate data or corrupted data where we have missing mandatory attributes or things of this sort. So you can find this from CloudWatch logs, fix the files, and go run the job again. And this is why I'm saying that split your load into multiple files, smaller batches, so you can easily troubleshoot these failures. What does user experience looks like for users who have been migrated using this pattern? The user comes into your application and tries to sign in. This goes to Amazon Cognito, and Cognito responds that this user is active but is in reset required state. The UI then initiates an account recovery flow with Cognito. This will send a security code to the verification medium of this user, which is email or phone number. And the UI will then ask the user to provide the security code and the new password. And then the user is migrated once this is submitted. If you are using Cognito out-of-the-box hosted UI, or you're using Amplify, then all of this flow is done for you. You don't need to write any code to make this happen. If you are building your own custom UI, you can easily use the SDK and make the same transactions from your custom UI. The highlights of this pattern is that it provides you with faster migration. So if you're looking to, I just want to decommission my database and move as fast as possible, this is probably the fastest way to migrate users. This is also the most cost-optimized approach because imported users are not active. You're not charged for them until they become active. They attempt to sign in, or you make any changes to their profiles, and so on. Clearly, this requires password reset, as I mentioned. And these background jobs run on the background. They don't affect your actual quota. So as you run these migration jobs, your regular users can interact, can sign up, can sign in. No impact on that. Cognito runs these migration jobs at about 30 to 40 users per second. So this also might require some planning. You can expect to be able to import about 1 million to 2 million users per day. So if you are migrating 10 million users, this is 5 days. If it's 20 million users, then a couple of weeks. So just take this in mind as you plan your migration using this pattern. The next pattern is just-in-time migration. And as the name indicates, this is just in time. As the users come into your system, they attempt to do a transaction, you migrate the user at this time. In this pattern, you transition to Amazon Cognito from day one. So all of the new sign-ups and creations create against Amazon Cognito. All of the new sign-ins go also to Amazon Cognito, but Cognito then finds that the user does not exist in the directory. It triggers a user migration flow, and this takes you to a Lambda function, passing in the credential that came at step 1. From this Lambda function, you can take these credentials and check them against your existing identity solution that you are migrating from, or a replica from this identity solution. So if you want to decommission your identity solution, or you just want to move from a SaaS product or something like this, you can take a data dump, park this in a temporary storage, like a DynamoDB table, and then you can run this verification against the DynamoDB table until you are done with the just-in-time migration. If this validation succeeds and the credentials are valid, the Lambda trigger also retrieves the user profile and returns a success, which will create the user profile in Amazon Cognito and returns tokens to the front end. So from an end user perspective, this is seamless. I'm signing in with the same username and password that I always use. They are not aware that there's migration happening in the background. They start with authentication, they get back tokens, there is no friction in the middle. The same approach also supported during account recovery. So if a user comes into your system and they say, I forgot my password, they go into account recovery, Cognito triggers the migration flow to the same Lambda function, but in this time, it's firing the migration during an account recovery event. So there are no credentials to validate, it is just a username. In this case, the migration trigger retrieves the user profile from your backend or current system, creates the user in Cognito, and then initiates its own account recovery flow, which sends a security code to the user account recovery medium, email, or phone number, and returns to the front end that security code has sent. So the flow started with an account recovery, migration happens on the back end, and then Cognito returns that the security code has been sent. The UI then renders again, tell me the security code and the new password, and you are done. So again, from the perspective of an end user, they started an account recovery, they got back a security code, it works the same way they used to, they are not aware that there's a migration happening on the back end. Majority of customers use a mix of these two different patterns. So they run just-in-time migration for a few months, all of the active users are migrated, and then the remaining users are exported as bulk import into Cognito, and they are fine to reset their passwords. The way that this works is that, again, you transition to Amazon Cognito, you run just in time for a period of, commonly I see it between 3 to 6 months. During this period, all of the active users have been migrated successfully. And then at the end of this period, you take bulk import of the remaining users and import them to Amazon Cognito. The highlights of this pattern is that it gives your active users the best seamless experience. They are not required to change credentials, but it also allows you to have a clear timeline for the migration. It's not dangling forever, and you don't have to maintain these systems forever. Many customers choose to do this approach, and probably this gives you the best of the two patterns. The next migration approach is admin-created users. And this allows you to create users as an administrator, either using the APIs, using a script, or using even the admin console itself. You can think about it as pre-provisioning users and getting them ready so they can sign in. The way that this works is that as administrator, you create the user with a temporary password. Again, you can do this from the APIs, from a script, from the admin console. User is created in a forced change password status. And optionally, you can also send an invitation email to the user. So you can direct Cognito to send an invitation email with a temporary password. The user receives the email, get the temporary password, sign in with this, and should be able to change this password to a permanent one. Alternatively, you can also use another administration or backend API to set a permanent password for the user. So if you want to create the user, set a permanent password for them, and get them up and running, ready, no changes happen, you can do this as well. When this could be useful, if you have a database of, say, encrypted passwords, and you can safely and securely decrypt these passwords in your backend, then you can run a backend job that exports users, create them using admin APIs, decrypt their password, set this password as permanent, and then you are good to go. The user has been migrated successfully. These admin APIs also allows you to set multi-factor authentication. So if you have a scenario that I have users also with multi-factor authentication enabled, I want them to be migrated and ready to go with no changes, you can use this approach. However, this is not very cost optimized because these users are created using the APIs. They will be considered active for billing purposes. So if you are migrating 1 million users using this approach, you will be charged for 1 million monthly active users. The last approach or the last pattern is user federation. So if you allow users to sign in from multiple sources in your system, like using Facebook, using social providers, using SAML and OpenID Connect, in many cases, you may or may not need to migrate these users. So let's try to understand when to use this pattern and how it works. Similar to the previous pattern, you can use admin or backend APIs to pre-create the users into the user pool. So the user is created, you set a password for the user, and they are ready to be used. They are confirmed. You can then link this user to one or more external identities. So let's say that I created this user. I want to link them to 123 from Google, and ABC from Facebook, and email at example.com from a SAML provider. All of these 3 identities will be linked to this user. If the user signs in with any of these methods, they will be recognized in your system as the same user. So this allows you to merge these identities into one, deal with them as one, unify these identities regardless of where they come from or how they sign into your application. You can also optionally allow the user to set a password for their profile. And then in this case, they also can authenticate with a username and password in case they lost their access to the social provider or something like that. When to use this pattern and what are the characteristics of it? First, generally speaking, the ground rule is that you don't need to migrate federated users because Cognito creates these users just in time as they sign in. If you have 1,000 users signing in from social providers, you don't necessarily need to migrate these users. You need to configure the federation to the social provider. And if a user comes from a social provider, they will be created into Amazon Cognito. But in some cases, customers enrich the social profile with additional attributes. So say you allow users to sign in from a social provider, but then you give them a billing address, a shipping address, a customer ID, and you track their history, and all of this is data added to their profile. So if you have this case and you want to migrate this data over to Amazon Cognito, then this is the pattern to use. You can pre-provision the user, migrate all of these custom attributes into the new profile, and then link them to their social identity. And this will allow you to maintain these attributes as you transition to Amazon Cognito. This is also considered not very cost optimized because, again, it is following the same pattern as admin created users, and all of the created users are active for billing purposes. These are commonly the 4 core patterns of how to migrate users. Majority of customers use combination of these patterns or variants of these patterns, depends on their business use case. How to choose between them, I tried to put like a map of which features are supported in which pattern. You can use this as just a starting point to think about which pattern should I use. It might help you to like disqualify pattern immediately if it doesn't meet your business requirements, or you can narrow this down to 2 things and then you dig deeper into more of the details, more of the business requirements that allows you to choose which pattern works best for you. As I mentioned, most of the customers use combination of these or a tailored versions of these patterns that works best for their use cases. And the best next step is to look at some actual scenarios and how Fandango migrated some of their large brands to Amazon Cognito. And with that, I would love to give it to Deepak and Nauman to walk us through this experience.
Thanks, Mahmood. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Deepak Bhardwaj, and I'm the Director of Architecture at Fandango. Joining me is Nauman.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nauman Salim. I'm an architect with Fandango, where I'm currently focused on consolidating our approach to identity and authentication across our brands, and excited to share with you today how Amazon Cognito plays an important role in that initiative.
Thanks, Nauman. So a little bit about our business. Fandango's digital network allows users to discover and watch premium entertainment wherever and whenever they want it. With Rotten Tomatoes, we allow users to discover the best TV shows and movies, and also is backed by fan and expert movie recommendations. With Fandango, you can find the best seats at your favorite theaters, and with Fandango streaming, you can watch next-day TV shows and movies right out of the theaters. Our innovative Fandango 360 platform allows studios to potentially reach out to millions of ticket buyers and also help them attend their movies. And finally, we also have a robust promotions business called Fandango Rewards, where we partner with leading consumer brands from consumer goods to restaurants and helps user rewards with ticketing and streaming for their purchases. Next, Nauman is going to go over our AWS journey and scale.
Thanks, Deepak. So Fandango has been on AWS for nearly a decade. We deployed our first applications to the cloud back in 2013 using Netflix Asgard and began evaluating Cognito in 2019. Today, we use more than 80 unique AWS services in production. Our ticketing and home entertainment applications receive more than 100 million unique visitors every month, and our mobile applications have been downloaded more than 120 million times across iOS and Android. Next, let's take a look at some of our key business drivers for Cognito.
Thanks, Nauman. So as you can imagine, with all these mergers and acquisitions over the past few years, we had multiple tech stacks at play, and also came with them individual identity management solutions. Now, it came imperative for us to consolidate our approach into a single identity management solution. In order for us to focus on our key business initiatives, we wanted to offload any platform security and compliance concerns to a partner like AWS. Now, as you can imagine, as we grow our user base, we wanted the platform to be scalable to millions of concurrent users, which typically affects us during on-sale of extremely popular movies. We also desired native support for modern standards such as OAuth 2 and OpenID, and the ability to customize authentication flows, which may or may not include passwords. Now, as we grow our security stance, we wanted certain features out of the box, such as MFAs, device tracking, email verifications, and also the ability to revoke sessions in case a user or a device gets compromised. And finally, given our massive presence in AWS, we wanted native integration of our identity management solution that plays along nicely with our other AWS services. Next, Nauman is going to talk about the different migration strategies and certain key questions that we think you should answer before starting this journey.
So earlier, Mahmood showed us 2 ways of importing users into Amazon Cognito using either just-in-time migration or bulk migration. Now, determining the best plan for your application is going to require evaluating trade-offs and how they affect your business requirements. For example, while bulk migration doesn't incur additional cost, placing users in a password reset state may not be acceptable from a user experience perspective. And in order to help kickstart your process, we've extracted a few questions that we found helpful in deciding our own migration strategy. So the first question, is your user data set within user pool limits? So by default, Amazon Cognito has a limit of 40 million users per user pool. And while this can be increased through a service ticket, when we were integrating the Rotten Tomatoes application, our data set exceeded the availability of the service quota at the time. And while this may sound like a showstopper, we'll look at how we worked around this in a coming slide. The next question is, do you plan on retaining your existing user IDs? So by default, Cognito is going to generate new user IDs for all the users in a user pool. And if you have any data in your application associated to your existing user IDs, then this becomes an important consideration for your migration plan. For Fandango, we decided to retain our legacy ID as a custom attribute on the Cognito profile and continue to use that to resolve user data going forward. While for Rotten Tomatoes, we decided to adopt new Cognito-generated IDs and needed to account for remapping or updating a large data set of user-generated content. The third question, can you keep your existing database and related authentication services online for the duration of migration? As Mahmoud showed, with just-in-time migration, the user migration Lambda function requires access to your existing user accounts. And if you're planning to adopt Cognito for cost benefits, then having to maintain your existing infrastructure alongside Amazon Cognito may not be ideal. For Fandango, our account APIs were part of our core services platform, so this was not a concern to keep maintaining those APIs for the duration of migration. While for Rotten Tomatoes, it was critical that we retire our legacy database as part of the switch to Cognito. And the last question, do you need to retain user passwords? For Fandango, we didn't want to introduce any additional friction for our users, especially when they may be transacting and purchasing tickets through our checkout funnel. And for Rotten Tomatoes, we actually decided to do something new and do away with passwords altogether and developed a passwordless login system on top of Cognito. So next, Deepak is going to walk us through the Fandango approach in more detail.
Next one. So with the Fandango approach, I guess the key part to highlight here is we had two key mandates before we started this migration process. Number one, like Numan mentioned, we could not afford any user friction like resetting passwords. And also, we could not change the roadmap of our end client teams, including front-end and mobile teams. So as such, we chose the just-in-time seamless migration flow that Mahmoud talked about in his previous slides. So as the very first step, we identified our active users. Now for us, an active user is someone who has transacted within the past 2 years, but for your business, it may be a totally different definition. And the reason we did that was to identify, do our users fit in the Cognito user pool limits or not before we start this journey. Now, it was imperative for us to make sure that our existing data pipelines and downstream services do not go through a remapping effort. So we decided to retain our customer IDs as custom attributes for the existing users to map them to the Cognito-generated identities. We also had certain key requirements, such as reducing our PII scope from our identity tokens. And I will talk about this in more detail in the coming slides. And also, we wanted the ability to link social accounts, especially for users who come in with the same email address and they're already registered within your system. And we leveraged Lambda triggers to support those use cases. And finally, that gave us the capability to decommission and retire any authentication-related bits from our account services. So let's talk about the phase one approach in a little bit more detail. So as you can see, the prime goal was just-in-time migration of user accounts. And the way we accomplish that is our users come in through our regular web clients and native iOS and Android clients. They would submit their email and password or credentials to a centralized account service. The account service will basically check the user for validating the credentials and also check whether the user has been migrated to Cognito or not by using a custom flag. If the user has not been migrated to Cognito, we issue a server-side call to the user pool using the Cognito SDK. And we also tag along the custom user identity as a custom attribute. Now, given that this user is a brand new user in Cognito user pool, Cognito will natively fire a user migration Lambda trigger, where we confirm the user status and also suppress any outgoing messages to the end user. Now, this is important because the user was already existing in your system, and you do not want to send any custom welcome messages to the end user. And we talked about a little bit reducing our PAI scope from our identity tokens, we leverage the pre-token generation Lambda triggers to suppress any claims, such as email and names. So some of the highlights of this approach, it is a server-side authentication and migration strategy that does not affect your users and your end clients from day one. It is an active migration strategy, and the reason for that is, given that Fandango is a transactional business, we did not want to bet on Cognito before we have full certainty, and we wanted to have our account service as a fallback service in case things don't work out. And also, it shows how you can link your existing user IDs and retain them and link them to existing Cognito identities using custom attributes. So let's talk about phase 2, where we started onboarding our clients. So now, given the increased attack vector on web clients, especially using cross-site scripting and cross-site requests, forgery requests, we wanted to go the extra mile and secure our tokens as secure cookies instead of local storage. Now again, this is all about defense in depth. We chose the web clients to have a little more security. It's a trade-off. But for your use cases, local storage may work fine. So we built a custom proxy that basically interfaces between our web clients and Cognito and returns those tokens as secure HTTP-only same-site cookies. Now, when we talk about mobile clients, we have the luxury of iOS and Android key stores and keychains, so we can be a little bit more relaxed in those scenarios. We talked about the social linking aspect. Now, you may have a use case where a user comes in who is already registered with their username and password in your systems, but now they accidentally sign up or trying to sign up using an email provider like Google or Facebook. Now, for that, it is imperative that you link those identities together into a single Cognito profile so that you don't end up in duplicate accounts. And for that, we leverage the pre-sign-up Lambda trigger to link those identities. And we talked about before the suppressing of PII claims from our identity tokens, and we keep on leveraging the pre-token generation Lambda trigger to suppress any such concerns. Now, what that gave us is the ability to retire any authentication-related bits from our existing account service, so we can totally decommission it and have a full cutover to the new Cognito user pool. Some of the highlights of this approach, like we said, it addresses client-specific token security needs for web clients. It's a trade-off that may or may not apply to you, but we show you how you can achieve that using a custom approach. And also, we show you how you link existing identities and social identities from Google and Facebook into a single account during sign-up. Next, I'm going to hand it over to Numan, who's going to talk about a totally different strategy that we use for Rotten Tomatoes for different requirements and constraints.
Thanks, Deepak. So for Rotten Tomatoes, the first challenge we needed to overcome were the user pool limits. And what we did was look at 12 months of sign-up and sign-in data and made the determination that with just-in-time migration, we could proceed with sufficient capacity and adopt Cognito. Next, because we were adopting Cognito-generated IDs and needed to remap a large data set of content, including ratings and reviews, we decided to piggyback on the just-in-time migration process to perform ID remapping for users as they were coming in through Cognito for the first time. And lastly, in order to support decommissioning our database, we decided to park users in a more cost-effective data store and performed a one-time bulk migration of users into a DynamoDB table. Because Rotten Tomatoes is not a transactional business, we're given a little bit more freedom to try new ideas. And one idea that was really popular with both product and engineering teams was passwordless login. So today, when you visit the Rotten Tomatoes application, you're presented a single form for both sign-in and sign-up. And when you submit that form, Cognito will trigger the custom auth flow, which use our token and email service to deliver a magic link to your inbox that you can use to click and be instantly logged in to the Rotten Tomatoes application. Now, while Cognito doesn't provide passwordless out of the box, the flexibility of the custom auth triggers allow you to build just about any authentication model imaginable. Also, since deploying passwordless to production, we feel that overall it's an improved user experience, as users no longer need to create or remember complex passwords for our system. Let's take a look at the user migration in more detail. So as mentioned, we've migrated users from our legacy database into DynamoDB. We did that by extracting users into CSV files, which were uploaded to Amazon S3. From there, a Lambda function was responsible for writing those users into DynamoDB. And since we weren't using passwords, we weren't able to leverage the user migration Lambda function provided by Cognito. Instead, we decided to repurpose post-confirmation to perform the actual user migration. So once a user logs into Cognito for the first time and post-confirmation is invoked, it will query DynamoDB to look for an existing legacy user account. And if that account is found, it will copy over profile attributes to their Cognito profile, including their legacy ID, which is preserved as a custom attribute. Now, post-confirmation is also responsible for triggering our ID remapping process. Once post-confirmation determines that a user is being migrated, it will publish an event to Amazon Kinesis containing both their new Cognito ID and their legacy ID. From there, that event will be fanned out to several Lambda functions that are responsible for performing ID remapping across various data stores. Now, in our testing, we found for some of our more power users, this process could take several minutes. And we decided to make changes on the client side to try and accommodate for any delays. So when a user loads the Rotten Tomatoes application and they're logged in, the application will try and determine if that user was recently migrated. And it does so using two attributes. First, their legacy ID, and second, their sign-up date, both which are preserved as custom attributes and made available in the ID token. Once the application determines that a user was recently migrated, it will call the backend to resolve user data, passing along both their legacy ID as well as their Cognito user ID. And while this may not be applicable for your application, we do recommend, at a minimum, to provide some messaging to your users so they're not left wondering why their data isn't available immediately. And we feel that this is a more seamless experience for our users. And if you're able to persist data such as legacy IDs and sign-up dates and ID tokens, your applications can make these determinations completely on the client side without additional server-side calls. Next, Deepak will walk us through some of the learnings from our experience with Cognito.
Thanks, Naman. So I guess this is the most important slide of our presentation. Again, this highlights our learnings and opportunities that we faced. But to emphasize that some of our learnings may or may not apply anymore to your use cases because the product is developing. And we always recommend checking with your AWS partner for latest guidance and also up-to-date product documentation. To begin with, we highly recommend checking your existing security policies, especially around password policies and account lockout policies. Now, what does that mean? For password policies, think about password lengths, minimum lengths, maximum lengths, any special characters that may or may not go well with Cognito. And as far as account lockout policies, I'm sure your organization also has custom account lockout policies where if a user is trying to sign in multiple times with invalid credentials, you lock out the user. Now, Cognito does come with a native account lockout policy out of the box. It is not customizable, so you may want to retain your own custom strategy or just build on top of Cognito policy. We talked about secure token storage for web clients. Again, this is a defense in-depth scenario. The more layers we add, the better it is for security. For web clients, we wanted to go the extra mile using secure cookies instead of local storage. But again, your organization's security posture will define which approach we want to go forward with. Highly recommend thinking through token customization requirements. Especially, we showed an example where we suppress any PII claims from identity tokens using the pre-token generation Lambda trigger. This may or may not apply to you, but also you may have a need to customize your access tokens going forward to add or remove any custom scopes or claims. Now, depending on your business continuity and disaster recovery strategy, you may have a need where you want to export your users to a different region. This can be achieved using a custom reference architecture provided by AWS, and we recommend working closely with them to support this use case. And finally, we highly recommend making a plan in beginning to decide what to do with the users who are not migrated. These were the users who were inactive to begin with. Now, there are a couple of options. Number one, you can take the extreme step and retire them, which may or may not be OK. And the second approach is to do a bulk import, like Mahmood showed in one of his approaches, which will involve a password reset. But then again, it might be OK, given that these users were inactive to begin with. And with that, we'd like to thank you for your time, and also to AWS for giving us this opportunity. To hand it off to Mahmood.
Thanks, Deepak. Thanks, Noman. This is very helpful, and I hope this was insightful to help you understand how to approach these migration patterns and what you can put on your plate as you plan this migration. In the next couple of slides, I just want to share with you a few final thoughts on what should go on your checklist as you plan for this migration. The first thing is set your migration priorities. So try to think of what is most important to you. Is it faster migration, or is it customer experience? Is it something that you're trying to retire on your back end? Is it an optimization that you need to go through from cost perspective, or do you need to support a new standard that you're looking for? All of these priorities will help you to choose which migration pattern works best for you. And keep in mind that migration is a transition period. You will be running multiple systems, and the faster it is, the better for you. Next, try to minimize the time you are running two or multiple identity solutions, because you have to worry about keeping them in sync. You have to worry about multiple sources of truth. And potentially bringing this down to the minimum possible is in your best interest. Most of the complexity that comes in my customer engagements is that they want to synchronize systems, or I want to write users in two places, and this is usually hard to do and source of a lot of errors. So try to avoid this and keep it to minimum. Baseline your current utilization and understand your requirements in terms of scale. So it is important to understand what is your current organic utilization, what is your current peak transactions per second, when does your system spike, and what are your requirements when this spikes, because this will help you to, again, design your environment, design your Cognito migration, design your user pool, and everything in different ways. The default limits from Amazon Cognito is pretty generous as a managed provider, and we saw mostly customers with 1 to 2 million users are operating very comfortably within these default limits. But again, for every customer, understanding your system, baselining your system, and understanding where do you want to go in terms of limits will help you and help us to provision enough capacity for you. So of course, if default limits are good for you, that is fine. If you need more limits, then this is the planning phase we need to take together to make sure that you can meet your requirements on Amazon Cognito. Relevant to this point, decide what you need to monitor as you transition to Amazon Cognito. So monitoring the quota and utilization in service quota, for example, and understanding your utilization against your quota and setting some alarms for this quota will set you for success. So you want to move this transition, migrate to Amazon Cognito, but you want to make sure that you are operating successfully. So knowing where to look, monitoring quota, monitoring success and failure rates, monitoring the transactions and critical actions in Amazon Cognito, all of this is helpful, and this should be part of your migration plan. Similarly, creating alarms, creating dashboards for critical actions, all of this needs to be part of the migration plan. So migration is not just moving users, but moving users and having an operational plan for how to be successful in Amazon Cognito. The next point is security considerations. As Deepak mentioned, password policy is one of them. But what are your requirements regarding multi-factor authentication, regarding firewall requirements? Do you need to use adaptive risk-based authentication or not? Do you need to prevent the use of compromised credentials or not? All of these things should be clearly defined in your priority list, and then you should have a plan of how this will be implemented, because again, this can extend your migration plan to weeks, or it can make it shorter to days, depends on what are your requirements. Finally, set modernization goals upfront. So try to understand what is your goals 2 years, 3 years from now. Are you moving to fully passwordless? Are you going to support social federation? Are you building a SaaS product that will require SAML federation? All of these things will help you, again, set up your user pool, user schema, migration plans in different ways. So these are a few considerations you can take in mind as you go through your migration planning. Once you decide and set on which approach works for you or a variant of these approaches, start executing this and start doing phased rollouts if you can do that. So doing phased rollouts will allow you also to test the water, make sure that you improve your system, and have an easy transition to Amazon Cognito. Speaking about modernization, we have a line of sessions lined up for you to have hands-on experience. Some of these are already gone today, but we have a few of them tomorrow as well, especially the workshop. So feel free to join us, and I would like to invite you to join us in these workshops and have some hands-on experience. And finally, we definitely appreciate feedback. It helps us to improve the service. It helps other customers who are in your shoes. So please, if you use Cognito, as you use Cognito, give a feedback, anonymous feedback on this link, and this will help us a lot. With that, I appreciate being here. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening and the rest of your reinvent, rest of Reinforce. Thank you. Thanks, everyone.